They forced him to drink, and was made to drench himself in his own waste, just to attract swarms, flies, maggots, like a magnet. And for 17 days he was eaten alive from the inside out, and forced to stay conscious through every second. You weren't taught this in school or history lessons because the punishment was so disturbing that history only used it once and then buried it. Why would anyone invent a death so slow and so vile that even executioners refused to repeat it? The ancient world knew how to kill. Rome had crucifixion. Assyrians favored impalement. The Achaemenid Persian Empire ruled vast lands with iron will. Their power was built on control that stretched across deserts and mountains. For them, a quick death was almost kindness for some crimes. But mercy wasn't their goal, so they engineered something far more agonizing, a punishment designed to trap a person between life and death, a slow-burning torment that would leave no room for escape. They called it scaphism. Imagine being locked inside a wooden box, your body cradled, but your arms and legs left bare, exposed to the merciless world outside. The box floated in a stagnant pond, a prison in water and wood. You're forced to swallow a steady stream of milk and honey, but not as nourishment. This only feeds the insects that gather, turning your body into a hive of discomfort and pain. Every moment is a torment of mind and body, fully awake to every sensation, every bite, every sting. They wanted turning a person's suffering into a spectacle, days or even weeks of unbearable existence before death finally came. Born in the heart of the Persian Empire, this method pushed cruelty into a new realm. So what drives a civilization to create a punishment that traps a victim between life and death like this? What does it reveal about power, fear, and the darkest edges of human nature? Sit back and let's peel those layers. In the Persian time and era when scaphism was born, betrayal was a deep wound. It was considered far more than murder. Killing a man was one thing, but betraying a king, a kingdom, a sacred trust, that was unforgivable. Fear became more than just a tool, it was a weapon sharpened to perfection. They wanted to send a message so clear and terrifying that no one dared cross the line again. The body became the message. Every visible wound, every lingering agony was a warning carved into flesh and memory. Imagine your enemies watching this unfold, not just a quick death, but a slow, public unraveling that crushed hope and courage. If someone threatened your kingdom, your family, your way of life, how far would you go to protect it? And in protecting what we love, do we risk becoming monsters ourselves? The name scaphism comes from the Greek word scaphe, which means boat. The Greeks borrowed this term to describe a punishment they heard about in Persia. Just in case you've forgotten, let's paint the picture again. Two narrow boats or long logs, placed together like a crude coffin. The victim's body is sealed inside, trapped between the wooden walls, but their arms and legs are left hanging out, helpless, exposed. They can't move, they can't escape, and then the real horror begins. They're force-fed a mixture of milk and honey not to soothe, but to torment. It fills their stomach and fuels the swarm of insects that are drawn to the sweetness, turning the victim's body into a slow, crawling trap. Day after day there is no relief, no mercy, no end in sight. So who would be sentenced to such a fate? Who was believed to deserve this unimaginable punishment that it had to be invented? It was a man called Mithridates. Mithridates was a soldier, a man hardened by battle and loyal to the Persian king. But one night, fueled by wine and pride, he made a deadly mistake. In a loud boast, he claimed credit for killing Cyrus, the brother of King Artaxerxes II. Whether it was ambition, arrogance, or just a moment of reckless bravado, those words sealed his fate. The empire couldn't tolerate such claims, especially when they challenged the king's family. An investigation followed, interrogations that chipped away at Mithridates' defenses, searching for truth or a confession. And when the verdict came, they didn't just want him dead, they wanted him erased. Imagine the thoughts that must have raced through his mind in those final hours. Did he regret his boast, or did he curse the day he opened his mouth too wide? Was it fear, anger, or desperate hope that kept him conscious as the punishment began? His story is not just about cruelty, it's about the price of words in a world ruled by power and fear. The punishment wasn't left to chance. It was executed with cold precision. First, they crafted the wooden shell, 2 boats or planks joined tightly, creating a narrow cage. Inside it, Mithridates' body was pinned down, trapped so tight that even the smallest movement was impossible. But his arms and legs were left exposed, dangling, vulnerable to the world's worst. The slow drip of honey was forced down his throat. Milk followed to keep the insects coming, drawn by the smell, swarming in by their thousands. Flies buzzed and landed, signaling an unending reminder that this was no ordinary punishment. It was a system designed to break mind and body, piece by piece. No mercy, no pause, no end. Every detail planned and every element working together. And it was meant to last. Can you imagine the silence inside that box? Broken only by the drip of honey and the relentless buzz of flies. To give you a better understanding of how exactly scaphism was carried out, let's break it down step by step. The first phase is often denial. At first it didn't seem so bad. Trapped between boats, yes, but alive. The real torture was when the honey smeared on your face, your arms, your groin. Sweet, sticky. You'd tell yourself, I can endure this. But the Persians weren't in a hurry. They knew the mind breaks faster when it has time to imagine what's coming. Then phase 2, the sickness. This is where the milk and honey did their work. Your body, forced to gorge, revolted, violent diarrhea, dehydration, the stench of your own waste mixing with honey. A putrid cocktail that drew the first wave of insects. Ever had food poisoning? Multiply that by 10. Now imagine feeling flies crawling into your nostrils as you vomit. Then comes phase 3, the swarm. This is when the real feeding began. Wasps stinging your eyes, ants gnawing between your fingers, maggots burrowing into open sores. Your body is now a banquet, and you're the guest of honor. Imagine yourself in that. At what point would you stop fighting? Once phase 3 is completed, phase 4 kicks in. This is the break. Fever sets in. Your brain, starved of water and sanity, starts to misfire. You see your mother, your gods. The executioner's face melts into a demon's. This is the cruelest joke of scaphism. You're dying too slowly to escape, but fast enough to feel every second. Phase 5, the unraveling. Your flesh turns black. Gangrene sets in. The maggots, they're not just on you anymore, they're in you, eating muscle, nerves, maybe even tasting your heart. And still you breathe. Phase 6 is the silence. By now you're barely human, a thing of bone and rot, too broken to scream, too ruined to plead. After all this, death still makes you wait. Phase 7, the end. 17 days. That's how long it took for shock, infection, and sheer despair to finish the job on Mithridates. Mithridates wasn't the only one broken by this. The Persians never used scaphism ever again. Some say it's because even they couldn't stomach it. Others say once you invent a punishment this perfect, you don't need to repeat it. The lesson had been taught. Suffering has a science. And scaphism understood it, centuries before we gave it a name. As the body breaks down, waste seeps into open wounds. Infection spreads through the bloodstream, triggering a chain reaction. This is septic shock. Organs begin to shut down, blood pressure plummets, the heart strains, breathing becomes shallow. But long before the body gives out, the mind starts to collapse. Neurologically, torture rewires the brain. Prolonged pain strips away the ego, the sense of self. The lines between reality and nightmare blur. Sleep deprivation alone can cause paranoia, memory loss, even hallucinations. Now add the loss of control, the inability to move, to scream, to escape. In modern times, techniques like sensory deprivation and stress positions echo the same purpose: to destroy identity, to erase resistance. But scaphism didn't just want obedience, it wanted silence. A silence so total and absolute that even memory would fear it. That was its true power, pain not just to kill, but to erase. The victim wasn't left alone. Each day guards returned, not to show mercy, but to maintain the suffering. They cleaned just enough to keep infection from killing too soon. They fed just enough to keep the heart beating. Their job wasn't to end life, it was to stretch it. So who were these people? Monsters in uniform, or just men doing what they were told? History's full of these faces. Nazi doctors who kept prisoners alive for experiments. The staff of Unit 731 in Imperial Japan who tested the limits of pain. Even medieval torturers who passed their tools down like heirlooms. Were they evil, or did the machine of power twist them until they couldn't see what they'd become? It's easy to say I'd never do that, but if your job, your family, your survival depended on obeying orders, would you still say no? Our only detailed account of scaphism comes from one man, Plutarch, a Greek historian writing long after the fall of Persia. So, was it real, or was it propaganda? Greek storytelling meant to paint their enemies as savages? It's a fair question. History is often written by those who needed villains. But here's where things get unsettling. The core of scaphism, prolonged torture through forced feeding, insects and exposure, appears in other cultures too. In ancient China, there was lingchi, death by 1,000 cuts. The Mongols mastered psychological tactics, using fear and spectacle to paralyze cities before a single arrow flew. And in feudal Japan, tales tell of prisoners restrained and smeared with sweet paste to lure insects. So maybe Plutarch exaggerated, maybe he didn't. But when the same blueprint appears again and again across time and place, it stops sounding like fiction. It starts to feel real. A truth human civilizations have always danced around, that the line between punishment and performance has always been frighteningly thin. Over time, scaphism gained other names. Some called it the boats, others whispered of it as torture by decay, names that sound almost poetic until you remember what they really meant. And even though the Persian Empire crumbled, the idea didn't. It lingered in literature. In Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, a character is sentenced to death by exposure at sea, an echo of the boats. In the ancient Allen by H. Rider Haggard, a man is bound, left to rot, swarmed by insects. These weren't just stories, they were hauntings, a punishment so vile it refused to die with the people who used it. It lived on, in whispers, in warnings, in the darkest corners of imagination. Because once you hear about scaphism, you don't forget it. And maybe that's the point. So where does scaphism land in the Hall of Fame of human cruelty? Crucifixion was public, the pain unimaginable, but it had a strange mercy. You'd die in hours, maybe days, and for some that cross became a symbol, a rebellion. Now compare that to the blood eagle, ritualistic, almost artistic in its savagery. But here's the catch. Historians still debate if it was real or just Norse propaganda. And if it was real, it was over in minutes. But scaphism? Just pure calculated unmaking. It wasn't about pain, it was about time, about reducing a person to a fever dream of rot and insects. No last words, no dignity, just the sound of your own body betraying you bite by bite. So, which is worse, the agony everyone sees, the myth that terrifies centuries later, or the one that leaves you alone in the dark, begging for a death that won't come? So why does any of this matter now? Because scaphism, what it was, still exists in spirit. We may not build boats or drip honey, but we've found new ways to break people without touching them. Solitary confinement, days, months, years spent alone, with no human contact. The brain bends, the soul withers. It's legal in over 100 countries. Psychological operations, weaponized narratives, digital warfare, fear by algorithm. No gallows, no blood, just silence, shame, isolation, public shaming, now carried out in millions of screens. You're not tied to wood, but the swarm still comes. Click by click, share by share, it's control, refined, digitized, sanitized. But the core hasn't changed. The line between history and modernity isn't time, it's visibility. What once happened in the open now hides in systems, screens, and silence. Scaphism teaches us that cruelty doesn't die, it adapts, and the moment we forget that, we let it happen again. 17 days, that's how long it took to kill Mithridates' body, but his mind, that may have died much earlier, we'll never know the exact moment when he gave up. Maybe it was when the insects stopped bothering him, because there was nothing left to feel. Maybe it was when the guards came with food, and he no longer had the strength to swallow. Or maybe it was long before that. The moment he realized no one was coming to save him. He was a man who spoke too loudly in the wrong empire, and for that they made sure his voice faded slowly, one breath at a time. History left him nameless in most records. No tomb, no statue, only pain. And a warning. Because this wasn't just about death, it was about erasing someone so completely, time itself would hesitate to remember. But now you know, and now, he's not forgotten. Which of the punishments in history do you think was worse than scaphism? Drop it in the comments. If stories like this interests and fascinates you, hit that subscribe button and watch out for our next video.